The military starship Ariadne cut through the vast emptiness of space like a precision instrument. Cole Odell stood at the docking bay viewport, his reflection overlaying the approaching vessel. At 32, his dark hair was already graying at the temples, a testament to countless hours spent solving complex engineering problems. His pressed uniform bore the insignia of Earth's Military Engineering Corps, and his straight posture spoke of someone who found comfort in order and discipline. "Welcome aboard the Ariadne, Mr. Odell." Captain Sarah Morgan's voice carried the crisp authority of someone used to command. "I trust your journey was uneventful?" "Exactly as calculated, Captain." Cole turned, offering a precise nod. "I've reviewed the preliminary reports on your power grid issues. The sooner I can begin diagnostics, the better." A ghost of a smile crossed Morgan's face. "Straight to business. Your reputation precedes you, Mr. Odell. Follow me to the engineering bay, and we'll get you settled in." As they walked through the pristine corridors, Cole noted every detail with professional appreciation. The Ariadne was a marvel of human engineering, one of the newest vessels in the fleet, but even the best systems needed maintenance, and the power fluctuations they'd been experiencing could become dangerous if left unchecked. "Your quarters are on Deck C, Section 4, Morgan said as they reached the main engineering hub. "Though there's been a slight complication." Cole's stride faltered. "Complication?" "We have an unexpected passenger aboard, a Viridian female. There was a mix-up with her transport, and due to diplomatic protocols, we're required to accommodate her until alternative arrangements can be made." "I don't see how this affects my assignment, Captain." Morgan's expression tightened. "Space is at a premium, Mr. Odell. You'll need to share your quarters." Cole stopped walking entirely. "Share? With an alien civilian? That's completely against protocol. These are unusual circumstances. The Viridians are a newly contacted species, and maintaining good relations is crucial." "Besides," Morgan added with what seemed like carefully measured amusement, "it's temporary." Before Cole could protest further, the engineering bay doors slid open. The vast room hummed with energy, banks of computers lining the walls and conduits crisscrossing the ceiling. At least here, things made sense. Numbers, equations, power flows. These were problems he could solve. "Get settled in, review the systems," Morgan said. "Your access codes have been uploaded. And Mr. Odell, try to be diplomatic about the quarter situation." Cole spent the next 4 hours immersed in diagnostic data, barely noticing as the engineering crew worked around him. The power fluctuations were more complex than initially reported, subtle variations in the quantum matrix that shouldn't have been possible with current technology. "Fascinating," he muttered, fingers flying over the holographic interface. "The variance patterns almost look organic." "Something smells wonderful in here." The musical voice shattered Cole's concentration. He looked up to find the engineering crew frozen, all eyes fixed on the doorway. His own gaze followed theirs, and for the first time in his life, Cole Odell forgot about numbers entirely. The woman, if that term even applied, seemed to float rather than walk into the room. Her skin was a subtle shade of green that shifted like sunlight through leaves, and her eyes were the deep purple of twilight. Long silver-white hair cascaded down her back in elaborate braids, interwoven with tiny crystals. She wore what appeared to be standard civilian clothing, but somehow made the simple jumpsuit look like exotic evening wear. "I'm looking for Cole Odell," she announced to the room, her accent musical and strange. "The nice captain said he's my new roommate." Cole's throat went dry. This had to be some sort of mistake. The Viridians were rumored to be a race of natural empaths and enchantresses. Their very presence could affect the emotional state of those around them. How was he supposed to work under these conditions? "I'm Odell," he managed, standing straighter. "And you are?" She glided toward him. There really was no other word for her movement, and smiled. "Talira Viridiana, but please call me Tali. Everyone does." She extended her hand in what was clearly a practiced imitation of human greeting. "I'm so sorry about the mix-up with quarters. I was supposed to be on a transport to Centauri Prime, but somehow ended up here instead. Isn't it funny how the universe works?" Cole didn't find it funny at all. As he reluctantly took her hand, a wave of something like warm sunshine seemed to flow through him. He dropped her hand quickly, taking a step back. I need to finish these diagnostics, he said stiffly. Perhaps we can discuss arrangements later. Oh, of course. Don't let me interrupt your work. I just wanted to introduce myself properly. She turned to leave, then paused. Although, that's interesting. Despite himself, Cole asked, What's interesting? Tali gestured to his holographic displays. Those energy patterns. They look like the meditation waves we use in our temples back home. See how they pulse? She traced a finger through the air, following the flow of data. Like breathing. Cole stared at her, then back at the display. She was right. The power fluctuations did mirror biological rhythms. But how could she possibly? Just an observation, Tali sang out as she danced toward the door. See you in our quarters, Rumi. The engineering crew watched her leave, several of them sighing audibly. Cole turned back to his work, trying to ignore the lingering scent of something like jasmine and stardust in the air. He had equations to solve, systems to fix. He didn't have time for whatever this was. But when he looked at the power fluctuation patterns again, all he could see was the way her finger had traced their flow, like she was reading music only she could hear. Later that evening, Cole stood outside his assigned quarters, pulse racing as though he was about to enter a combat zone rather than his own living space. He delayed as long as possible, running additional diagnostics and filing preliminary reports, but eventually he had to face the situation. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and Cole's carefully ordered world tilted sideways. The standard military quarters had been transformed. Diaphanous fabrics in shades of purple and silver draped the walls, somehow making the small space seem larger. Crystal prisms hung from the ceiling, casting rainbow patterns across the surfaces. The air was thick with the scent of some alien incense that made his head swim pleasantly. Tali sat cross-legged on one of the narrow beds, eyes closed in meditation. She'd changed into what appeared to be traditional Viridian clothing, flowing layers of translucent material that managed to be both modest and utterly distracting. Welcome home, she said without opening her eyes. I hope you don't mind, but military quarters are so sterile. I needed to adjust the energy flow. This is completely against regulations, Cole said, trying to keep his voice steady. These quarters need to be maintained to standard specifications. Now she did open her eyes, fixing him with that unsettling violet gaze. Really? And where in your regulations does it specify that temporary fabric arrangements are forbidden? She smiled sweetly. I checked, you see, very thoroughly. There's nothing prohibiting temporary decorative modifications that don't damage the structure. Cole opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. She was right, damn it. The regulations covered permanent alterations, but temporary changes were a gray area at best. The incense, then. It could interfere with the air filtration systems. Oh, don't worry, it's completely non-toxic and approved for use in enclosed spaces. Would you like to see the certification? She reached for a small bag near her bed. That won't be necessary. Cole moved to his own bed, the one not draped in alien fabrics, and set down his datapad. I have work to review. I'd appreciate quiet. Of course. I'll just finish my evening meditation. You won't even know I'm here. Somehow Cole doubted that very much. He could feel her presence like a warm current in the air, making it difficult to focus on the power consumption charts on his screen. The incense wasn't helping either. Something about it made his thoughts feel loose and fluid, less rigid than usual. A soft humming sound began to fill the room. Tali performing what he assumed was part of her meditation. The sound seemed to resonate with something in his chest, making his heart beat slightly faster. Could you? He started to say, but when he looked up, the words died in his throat. Tali had risen from her meditation pose and was gathering items for the shower. As she moved, her clothing shifted like water, revealing glimpses of green skin that seemed to glow from within. She caught him looking and smiled, not flirtatiously, but with genuine warmth that somehow made it worse. I'll be quick, she promised, disappearing into the small bathroom. Unless you'd like to share, I hear humans are very concerned about water conservation. Cole nearly dropped his datapad. That won't be necessary, he said quickly, his voice rougher than he intended. Her musical laugh drifted through the door, followed by the sound of running water. Cole stared at his screen, trying to force himself to focus on power consumption algorithms, while very deliberately not thinking about what was happening less than 3 meters away. This was going to be a very long assignment. The next morning, Cole woke precisely at 0600 hours, as he always did. He lay still for a moment, hoping the previous day had been some sort of stress-induced hallucination. Then he caught the scent of that alien incense and heard soft, rhythmic breathing from across the room. He turned his head carefully. Tali was asleep on her bed, silver-white hair spread across her pillow like starlight. The early morning lighting from the ship's day cycle made her green skin seem to shimmer slightly. She'd wrapped herself in some sort of silvery sleeping garment that managed to be both modest and completely distracting. Cole got up as quietly as possible, gathering his uniform and heading for the bathroom. He needed to start his day, maintain his routine. The power grid wasn't going to fix itself. "Good morning, engineer." Tali's voice, husky with sleep, stopped him halfway to the bathroom. "You're up so early." "Standard military schedule," he said stiffly, not turning around. "I have work to do." The sun isn't even properly up yet." "Oh, wait, we're in space." She laughed softly. "I'm still getting used to that. On Viridia, we rise with the triple suns." Despite himself, Cole's engineering curiosity was piqued. Triple suns? That must create some interesting atmospheric effects. "Oh yes, the light dances differently every day. Sometimes purple, sometimes gold." She stretched, the movement catching in Cole's peripheral vision. "Would you like to hear about it over breakfast? I usually eat in engineering while reviewing reports." "How terribly efficient of you." He could hear the smile in her voice. "And terribly lonely. Come on, just this once. I'd love to learn more about this fascinating ship of yours." Cole made the mistake of turning around. Tali had sat up, her hair slightly mussed from sleep, her violet eyes bright with genuine interest. There was something about her expression, entirely free of guile or manipulation, that made his carefully constructed refusal crumble. "One breakfast," he conceded, "but I have a strict schedule to maintain." "Of course!" She practically bounced out of bed. "Let me just freshen up first, unless you'd like to." "I'll wait outside," Cole said quickly, retreating to the corridor before she could finish that thought. 10 minutes later, they sat in the ship's mess hall. Despite the early hours, several crew members were already present, and Cole couldn't help noticing how their eyes followed Tali. She seemed oblivious to the attention, focused entirely on her breakfast and their conversation. "So these power fluctuations," she said, gesturing with her fork, "they're not just mechanical, are they? There's something organic about them." Cole leaned forward, surprised by her insight. "Exactly. The patterns don't match any known mechanical failure. It's almost as if the ship is breathing," Tali finished, "like it's developing its own energy signature." "That's impossible, of course." "Is it?" She tilted her head, crystals in her hair catching the light. "Your species is so quick to decide what's impossible. On Viridia, we believe everything has energy. Everything has, what's your word? Consciousness." "Ships don't have consciousness," Cole said firmly. "They have systems, protocols, mathematical certainties. And yet your power fluctuations follow patterns that look remarkably like meditation waves." She smiled mysteriously. "Perhaps the universe is more interesting than your equations suggest." Before Cole could argue further, Captain Morgan appeared at their table. "Mr. Odell, I need your preliminary report by 0800. And Miss Viridiana, we've made contact with your embassy. They're arranging transport, but it may take a few weeks." "Weeks?" Cole couldn't keep the dismay from his voice. "Is that a problem, Mr. Odell?" Morgan's tone carried a warning. "Not at all," he said quickly. "The work will take at least that long anyway." "Wonderful." Tali clapped her hands. "That gives us plenty of time to explore this consciousness theory of mine." "There is no theory. There are only facts, measurements, and solutions." "We'll see." Tali stood gracefully. "I think I'll explore the ship today, unless that's against your precious regulations." "Civilian guests are allowed in public areas," Cole said, checking his datapad. But stay out of engineering. I need to focus. Of course you do. She touched his shoulder lightly as she passed, and that same warm sunshine feeling flowed through him. Have fun with your equations, engineer. Cole watched her glide away, already drawing admiring glances from the crew. Then he noticed Captain Morgan watching him with an amused expression. She's disruptive, he said defensively. Sometimes disruption leads to innovation, Mr. Odell. Morgan smiled slightly. Maybe look at this as an engineering challenge. How do you maintain efficiency while adapting to unexpected variables? Variables should be controlled or eliminated. And yet some of our greatest discoveries came from embracing chaos rather than controlling it. Morgan's smile widened. Your report by 0800, Mr. Odell, and do try to enjoy the process of solving this particular puzzle. Cole spent the morning buried in diagnostics, trying to map the strange patterns in the power grid. But his usual laser focus kept slipping, disrupted by memories of green skin and violet eyes, of theories about ship consciousness and organic energy patterns. Impossible, he muttered, staring at the latest readings. Ships don't breathe. But as he watched the energy flow across his screens, he couldn't help noticing how it pulsed in perfect rhythm, like gentle waves, like meditation, like the rise and fall of Tali's chest as she slept in the morning light. Cole shook his head sharply. He had work to do. The last thing he needed was to let some alien mystic's fanciful ideas interfere with solid engineering principles. Even if those principles weren't quite explaining what he was seeing. Even if, just maybe, he needed to look at the problem from a completely different angle. Even if that meant admitting that sometimes, just sometimes, disruption might lead to discovery. But that was a dangerous line of thought, and Cole Odell didn't do dangerous. He did precise, measured, controlled. At least he used to. A week into Tali's stay, Cole noticed the first cracks in his carefully maintained routine. His uniform, usually pressed to military precision, had a slight wrinkle he'd missed that morning. He'd caught himself humming one of Tali's meditation chants in the shower. Worst of all, he'd started looking forward to their shared breakfasts. Your energy is different today, Tali observed, perched cross-legged on her bed while Cole reviewed the day's diagnostics. Less rigid. The power fluctuations are affecting my concentration, he muttered, not looking up from his datapad. They're becoming more frequent. Or maybe you're just learning to breathe. She moved to stand behind him, close enough that he could feel her warmth. See how the patterns match? The ship's energy, your breathing, the universal flow. There is no universal flow in engineering. No? Her fingers brushed his shoulder, sending that now familiar warmth through him. Then why does your pulse quicken when I do this? Cole jerked away, but not before noticing that the power readings on his screen had spiked at exactly that moment. That's, coincidence. Is it? She laughed softly. Come meditate with me. Just 10 minutes. For science, if you prefer. I have work, which will be there in 10 minutes. She tugged gently at his sleeve. Consider it an experiment, measuring the relationship between personal energy and ship systems. Put that way, it almost sounded reasonable. Professional, even. Cole allowed himself to be guided to the floor, where Tali had arranged cushions in a precise geometric pattern. Close your eyes, she instructed. Focus on your breathing. This is ridiculous. Shh. Engineer brain off. Just feel. Her voice shifted into that musical humming, the sound seeming to resonate in his chest. Despite his resistance, Cole found his breathing naturally synchronizing with the rhythm. The ever-present tension in his shoulders began to ease. Good, Tali murmured. Now reach out with your awareness. Feel the energy around you. Energy can't be felt, Cole protested weakly. It can be measured, quantified. Her fingers pressed gently against his lips, silencing him. Feel first, measure later. The touch of her fingers lingered even after she withdrew them. Cole sat very still, aware of her presence behind him, of the soft sound of her breathing, of the way the air seemed to pulse with that same rhythm. His eyes snapped open. The readings! He scrambled for his datapad, pulling up the power grid diagnostics. The patterns were clear now. Perfect synchronization between the ship's energy fluctuations and the meditation rhythm. Impossible, he breathed. Improbable, Tali corrected, leaning over his shoulder to study the display. But clearly happening. Your ship is dancing, Cole. It just needed someone to teach it the steps. The use of his first name sent an unexpected shiver through him. He turned to protest and found her face inches from his own. Those violet eyes filled with triumph and something else. Something that made his carefully ordered thoughts scatter like startled birds. I should report this to Captain Morgan, he managed. Probably. Tali didn't move away. But first admit it, I was right about the energy patterns. The data suggests certain correlations. Cole. Her smile was radiant. Just say it. Tali, you were right. The evidence indicates. She pressed her finger to his lips again, but this time let it trail slowly along his jawline as she withdrew it. We'll work on that. The ship's intercom crackled to life before Cole could respond. Engineering team to grid section 7. Power fluctuation detected. Cole practically leaped to his feet, grateful for the interruption. I have to. Go, go. Tali waved him away, still smiling. Your ship needs you, but this conversation isn't over. The power fluctuation turned out to be minor, but Cole stayed in engineering long after it was resolved, running unnecessary diagnostics and trying not to think about the feeling of Tali's finger tracing his jaw. Lieutenant Zhang found him there well past midnight, still staring at energy readings. You know, Zhang said carefully, the crew's been talking. About the power fluctuations? About you. Zhang leaned against the console. You seem different lately, more relaxed. Some even saw you smile yesterday. I smile, Cole protested. Not like that. Not like you know something wonderful and terrifying at the same time. Zhang grinned. Your Viridian friend is quite something. She's not my friend. She's a temporary inconvenience. Right. That's why you keep checking the security feeds from public areas when she's exploring the ship. Cole felt heat rise in his face. I'm monitoring potential system interactions with her. Energy signature. Of course you are. Zhang's grin widened. Just like you were monitoring system interactions when she was dancing in the recreation area yesterday. That was a traditional Viridian meditation exercise. Very athletic meditation. Zhang pushed away from the console. Look, all I'm saying is, maybe some disruption isn't bad. The crew likes her. Morale is up. Even Captain Morgan seems more relaxed. We're a military vessel, not a pleasure cruise. And you're an engineer, not a robot. Zhang headed for the door. Get some sleep, Cole. Your ship and your temporary inconvenience will still be here tomorrow. But when Cole finally returned to his quarters, Tali wasn't there. A note floated on the room's holographic display. Midnight meditation in Observation Deck 3. Join me if you dare. Cole stood staring at the message for a long moment. The sensible thing would be to get some sleep. He had early diagnostics scheduled, reports to file, a ship to fix. But the power readings from their meditation session nagged at him. And if there was a connection between Tali's energy and the ship's systems. Purely professional interest, he muttered, heading for the observation deck. He found her floating in zero gravity, her silver-white hair spreading around her like a cosmic halo. She'd activated the deck's transparent ceiling, and stars wheeled slowly overhead, casting ever-changing patterns of light across her green skin. I wondered if you'd come, she said without opening her eyes. Computer, restore gravity, 10%. Cole felt his feet settle gently to the deck as the artificial gravity gradually returned. Tali remained suspended, but lower now, at eye level. The artificial gravity could malfunction, he said. It's not safe to dance with me. What? Now she did open her eyes, violet gaze capturing his. In low gravity. It's the closest humans can come to how we move on Viridia. I'll show you how energy really flows. I don't dance. You don't meditate either, but you did that. She extended her hand. Trust the experiment, engineer. Cole knew he should leave, should maintain professional distance, should focus on his work. Instead, he took her hand. Tali pulled him gently into the low-gravity field, their bodies drifting closer. Feel the rhythm, she murmured, like the ship's power pulses, like breathing. Her hand was warm in his, her skin softer than he'd imagined. She guided him in a slow spin, their bodies moving in ways that would be impossible under normal gravity. See? Her voice was barely a whisper now. Sometimes letting go of control, a sudden power surge sent them tumbling together. Cole instinctively caught her, their faces inches apart as emergency lights flashed. "Bridge to engineering," the intercom crackled. "Major power fluctuation detected." Cole looked at his datapad, still clutched in his free hand. The energy patterns were going wild, but they matched perfectly with his heartbeat. "I should," he started. "Go," Tally said softly. "Your ship needs you." "But Cole?" Her lips brushed his cheek as she pushed away. "Think about what your heart is trying to tell you." Cole fled to engineering, his skin tingling where she'd kissed him, the ship's systems pulsing in rhythm with his racing pulse. Control, he reminded himself. He needed control. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure he wanted it. The next few days aboard the Ariadne became an elaborate dance of avoidance and inevitability. Cole threw himself into his work, but Tally's presence seemed to permeate every corner of the ship. Her laughter echoed through corridors, her scent lingered in their quarters, and worst of all, the power fluctuations seemed to intensify whenever she was near. "These readings make no sense," Cole muttered, staring at his diagnostic screen one evening. The numbers blurred before his eyes, exhaustion finally catching up with him. "Neither does denying what's happening between us." Tally's voice came from the doorway of engineering. She stood there in what appeared to be traditional Viridian evening wear, flowing layers of translucent silver that caught the light like stardust. "This is a restricted area," Cole said, not looking up. "Civilian access is permitted with proper escort." She smiled triumphantly. "Captain Morgan herself approved my request to observe your work. For cultural exchange purposes, of course." Cole finally looked up, ready to protest, only to find Captain Morgan standing behind Tally, an amused expression on her face. "Miss Viridiana has some interesting theories about the power fluctuations," Morgan said. "Given their correlation with her presence, I think it's worth investigating." "With all due respect, Captain, these are complex engineering issues, which aren't responding to conventional solutions." Morgan's tone left no room for argument. "Think outside your comfort zone, Mr. Odell. Sometimes the most elegant solutions come from unexpected directions." Before Cole could respond, she left them alone in engineering. The space suddenly felt much smaller. "Your energy is all twisted up," Tally observed, moving closer to study his screens. "Like you're fighting something that wants to flow naturally." "The only thing flowing naturally is my ability to concentrate," Cole muttered, but he couldn't help noticing how the power readings spiked as she leaned over his shoulder. "Interesting." Her breath tickled his ear. "The ship responds to proximity, just like you do." Cole jerked away, but Tally caught his wrist. The contact sent that now familiar warmth spreading up his arm. "Look at your readings," she said softly. "What does the data tell you?" He looked. The energy patterns pulsed in perfect rhythm with his heartbeat, creating interference patterns that looked almost like dancing, he whispered. "The energy is dancing. Just like in zero gravity." Tali's fingers traced patterns on his wrist. "Everything in the universe wants to dance, Cole. Even starship engines. Even stubborn engineers. This isn't," he started to say, but she pressed her finger to his lips again, a gesture that was becoming dangerously familiar. "Shh. Close your eyes. Feel the ship's rhythm. Feel your own." Against his better judgment, Cole closed his eyes. The constant hum of the engines seemed to shift, becoming more musical. He felt Tally step closer, felt the warmth of her presence like a magnetic field. "Now," she whispered, "tell me what your instruments can't measure." Cole's eyes snapped open. "The quantum field interactions," he breathed. "We've been measuring the wrong thing. It's not about power fluctuations, it's about resonance patterns between organic and mechanical energy states." "See?" Tali's smile was radiant. "Your heart knows things your equations don't." She was too close. The scent of her, something like starlight and impossible flowers, made it hard to think. Cole tried to step back, but found himself trapped between Tali and his console. "I should run new diagnostics," he managed. "You should kiss me." The words hung in the air between them, charged with more energy than the ship's entire power grid. Cole's carefully constructed world tilted on its axis. That would be, he searched for the right word, unprofessional? Hmm. Tali's fingers traced the collar of his uniform. Like dancing in zero gravity? Like meditation? Like admitting that maybe, just maybe, not everything can be measured and controlled? The power readings on his screen went wild. Warning lights flashed, but Cole couldn't look away from her violet eyes, couldn't fight the gravitational pull drawing them closer. The ship's intercom crackled. Bridge to engineering. Power surge detected in Section 5. Cole practically jumped away from Tali, his heart racing. I need to go. She smiled, but there was something new in her expression, a heat that had nothing to do with energy readings. But Cole, soon you'll run out of excuses, and when you do, she leaned in, her lips brushing his ear. I'll teach you how Viridians really dance. She glided away, leaving Cole staring at his wildly fluctuating instruments, his pulse matching their erratic rhythm. He had a ship to fix, reports to file, professional standards to maintain. But for the first time in his career, engineer Cole Odell wasn't sure the numbers were what really needed his attention. And somewhere in the ship's quantum matrix, energy patterns continued their endless dance, waiting for him to join them. The message arrived on a quiet morning shift. Cole was reviewing his latest findings about the ship's energy patterns when Captain Morgan's voice came through his private channel. Mr. Odell, the Viridian transport will arrive in 48 hours. The words hit him like a physical blow. Cole stared at his screens, watching the power readings pulse in suddenly erratic patterns. Understood, Captain, he managed. I'll ensure all relevant data is documented before Miss Viridiana's departure. Cole, Morgan's voice softened. Take the rest of the day off. Some equations need time to balance themselves. He found himself wandering the ship's corridors, eventually ending up in Observation Deck 3, the same place where he'd danced with Tali in low gravity, where he'd first felt the ship's energy moving in harmony with his own pulse. I thought I'd find you here. Cole turned to find Tali in the doorway. She wore traditional Viridian travel robes, and something about seeing her dressed for departure made his chest ache. The transport arrives in 48 hours, he said stiffly. I should prepare my final reports on the energy fluctuations. Always hiding behind your reports. She moved closer, her presence making the air itself seem to shimmer. What are you really afraid of, Cole? I'm not afraid. I'm being professional. Your energy says otherwise. She reached out, her fingers hovering just above his heart. You're like a quantum particle, trying to exist in two states at once, ordered and chaotic, controlled and free, professional, ... Her voice dropped to a whisper. And in love. That's not, Cole started, but the words died as Tali's hand made contact with his chest. The familiar warmth spread through him, but this time it carried an edge of something else, something that made the ship's gravity feel unreliable. Computer, Tali said softly, reduce gravity to 10%. As their feet left the deck, Cole found himself reaching for her automatically. Their bodies drifted together, finding the same natural rhythm they'd discovered that first night. The power readings, he tried again, will still be there tomorrow. Tali's fingers traced his jaw. But I won't be. The truth of it hit him like a surge through the quantum matrix. 48 hours. 2 days until she returned to her world of triple suns and dancing energy. 2 days until his ordered universe stopped making beautiful chaos. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. Do what? Any of it. Dancing, feeling, letting go. Tali smiled, but there was a shadow in her violet eyes. Yes, you do. You've been doing it since the moment we met. Every time you let me meditate in our quarters. Every time you smiled at my disruptions. Every time you felt the ship's energy dance and didn't try to force it back into rigid patterns. The ship. Cole's eyes widened. That's it. The fluctuations weren't a malfunction. They were the ship learning to dance with you. With us. Now you understand. Tali's smile turned bittersweet. Some energies are meant to interact, to change each other, even if they can't stay entangled forever. They drifted in silence, the stars wheeling overhead, their bodies moving in perfect harmony with the ship's pulse. "I need to show you something," Cole said suddenly. "Computer, restore gravity." As their feet settled to the deck, he took Tali's hand and led her to engineering. The room was empty this late in the shift, screens glowing with their eternal dance of numbers and patterns. "Look." He pulled up a specific set of readings. "This was the day you arrived, the ship's normal energy pattern. And this," he brought up another display. "This is now." The difference was stunning. Where the first pattern had been rigid, mechanical, the current readings showed complex harmonics, beautiful interference patterns that looked almost like music made visible. "You taught the ship to dance," Cole said softly. "You taught me to dance, and I've been so busy trying to measure and control it that I almost missed the most important reading of all." He turned to her, and for the first time since they'd met, he let himself really look at her. Let himself feel the full force of what had been growing between them. "I love you," he said simply, "and that terrifies me more than any power surge ever could." Tali's eyes widened, then filled with starlight. "Finally," she breathed, and pulled him into a kiss that made the ship's instruments go wild. When they broke apart, warning lights were flashing and the quantum matrix was showing readings that should have been impossible. Cole couldn't bring himself to care. "I still have to go," Tali said softly. "I know." Cole touched her cheek, marveling at how natural it felt now. "But maybe that's not the end of the equation." "What do you mean?" "The Ariadne needs a permanent consultant on quantum organic energy interactions. Someone who understands how ships learn to dance." He smiled. "I might know someone qualified." Tali's laugh was like music. "Are you offering me a job, Engineer Odell?" "I'm offering you a reason to dance with me again." He pulled her close as another power surge made the lights flicker. "Besides, someone has to help me maintain these new energy patterns you've created." She traced patterns on his chest. "And the fact that it means we'll be sharing quarters again is a purely professional consideration." "Of course." Her violet eyes sparkled. "Though I should warn you, Viridian cultural exchange protocols are very thorough." The next 48 hours passed in a blur of preparations, paperwork, and stolen moments in zero gravity. When the transport arrived, Tali boarded it with a promise to return within a month, leaving Cole with a kiss that set off every power sensor on the ship. Now he stood in their quarters, surrounded by the lingering scent of her incense and the soft hum of engines that would never pulse quite the same way again. On his console, a new message blinked. "Cultural Exchange Protocol 359. Viridian meditation techniques require close physical proximity for optimal energy transfer. Prepare appropriate accommodations for my return. Love, your quantum dance partner." Cole smiled, feeling the ship's energy pulse in harmony with his heart. Sometimes the most elegant solutions came from letting go of the equations and learning to dance.